We begin the hour with breaking news, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey will not remain silent as the Syrian regime surrounds Turkish observation posts in the Idlib de-escalation zone. Speaking to journalists while returning from Pakistan, Erdogan says Turkey will do whatever is necessary against regime forces. On Saturday, he had a telephone conversation with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump and raised concerns about the escalation in violence from the Russian-backed regime in northwest Syria. The ongoing attacks have led to a worsening humanitarian crisis on Turkey's border. Let's bring in our diplomatic correspondent Hassan Abdullah, who is in Reyhanlı in Turkey for us. Hassan, as we just read there, Erdogan is saying that regime forces are surrounding their observation posts. Can we expect Turkey to respond harshly as they said that they would do before?
Well, Afnan, Turkey has already started responding. The Turkish military has shelled the Assad regime forces and pushed them back in various areas, particularly around eastern Idlib and also northeast of Idlib. And also the opposition fighters that are supported by Turkey, they've been pushing the regime forces back around western Aleppo. So that is already happening. What the Turkish government has said is that if any Turkish soldier is harmed, then the response is going to be severe. Already we know that from Monday until today, at least 270 regime fighters have been killed, and that has been confirmed by the Turkish Defense Ministry. So there's already been a response. Of course, the response has been very calculated. Turkey says that it does not want to unnecessarily escalate the situation. It seeks to meet the objectives. And of course, it has given the Assad regime until the end of this month to push back to positions that are outside of the de-escalation zone.
Now, Hassan, we also heard that the meeting between Mevlut Çavuşoğlu and Sergei Lavrov went well. Is it possible to see some sort of deal come out between the two parties that will halt the fighting on the ground?
Well, that's a possibility, but there are a number of factors and challenges. For example, a Turkish delegation on Sunday will be in Moscow to meet Russian officials. They are going to be focusing on Idlib. But there's another factor that has to be taken into account. It seems that the Assad regime is trying to create polarization when it comes to Moscow and Ankara. It's trying to push Moscow to a position where it unconditionally continues supporting the Assad regime and not sort of take any sort of middle ground. Now, on part of Ankara, it seems the strategy is to compartmentalize relations. So we've heard from Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. He said that Turkey does not want relations with Russia to be affected because of differences on one issue. So it's quite possible that it will take time for the differences between the two countries to iron out over Syria. But of course, they continue to work over other issues such as defense cooperation and so forth. So it seems at the moment that it might take some time before the two can agree. Because remember, theoretically, they have agreed on de-escalation. They've agreed on a number of points. But when it comes to implementation, that's where Ankara says that Moscow has not been living up to its commitment.
Mm-hmm. You've had the chance to spend some time in Idlib recently where, as we know, thousands of people are fleeing at the moment. What's the situation like for them? What have they told you?
Well, the process of internal displacement continues for tens of thousands of people of Idlib. They've basically been moving around from one place to another. In many cases, they don't know where they're headed because some of the areas they felt were secure have become insecure as a result of this relentless bombing by the Assad regime and by Russians. But that tide appears to be turning, especially now that the opposition fighters say that they're focusing on the regime fighter jets and helicopters. This week they've shot down 2 helicopters that had been dropping barrel bombs. That obviously seems to have altered the equation slightly, and it seems that that has worried Moscow as well. On the humanitarian part, of course, the suffering continues. It's cold. Relief agencies, particularly Turkish relief organizations, are trying to cater for many of the people of Idlib who are basically hosted around the border with Turkey. But there are many people who are not registered, and it's difficult to reach many of those people. So, of course, that remains a challenge.
All right, Hassan, thank you for those updates. That's Hassan Abdullah joining us live from